Hey there, welcome back to Vowel Ventures. This video has been a long time in the making. It has been a lot more difficult to put together than I originally expected, but it should be a lot of fun. It probably won't be, but it should be. Instead, it's probably going to end up being very informative. This video is about nothing more than the basis behind the design of our 19.8 kilowatt off-grid vertically mounted solar system that we're using in our Alaska property. The whole thing was designed around December 21st, the winter solstice, shortest day of the year. Don't know much more to say about it. Let's get started. The first challenge we had was figuring out how big of a solar system we need. There's a lot of ways to do that. Simplest way is looking at your electric bill where you currently live. If you take your monthly kilowatt hour consumption divided by the number of days in that month, gives you your average daily kilowatt hour consumption. And if you're using that, that is the average amount of power that you would want to actually produce. Preferably the minimum amount of power you'd want to produce on a solar system in a 24-hour period. Once you know that average daily consumption, then you need to basically divide it by the amount of daylight hours, usable productive daylight hours of solar you have in the area you're wanting to build your system. In some areas you might have an average of 8, might have 10, might have 12, might have 5. Where we are, I didn't want the average. Because we're off-grid and because the winters are short, I wanted the shortest day of the year, how much productive solar energy that I can actually obtain. That is about a 2.5 to 3 hour window on December 21st. That said, I figured if an average is 30 kilowatt hour a day consumption, I'd want 2 days worth, roughly 60 kilowatt hour. Divide 60 kilowatt hour by a 3 hour window, you're roughly 20 kilowatt system. Right now we have a 19,845 watt 19.8 kW system. That is at a perfect world, clear skies, no frost, no snow, no clouds, no nothing. Realistically, you'll never have 100% efficiency. That's why I'm going to expand the system, and I already have the panels up there to add some more to it. And once we're moved up there, I'll keep expanding the system. But for now, we're good to go. The more undersized it is, the more it means you have to run a generator. Once you can produce enough power to offset the generator consumption, you're good to go. Generators are maintenance. They're a fuel expense. They're an item that's definitely necessary, but you can be concerned about their reliability, so the less you have to run it, the better. For us, once I knew I wanted roughly a 20 kilowatt system, I went to the pvwatts.nrel site. Here, I'll show it here. So here we are, pvwatts.nrel.gov/pvwatts, maybe that's backslash, pvwatts.php. From this site, you can put in your location, street address, city, state, probably GPS coordinates, or if you get close, you can drag the pointer around. Where we are, there's limited weather stations nearby. So Wasilla, Alaska is good enough. It pops up to the closest weather station to us, which is good enough. Once you're on this page, the system info page, this is where you put in all your system information. It's really easy. So we're going to start off with 19.85 DC size, system size in kilowatt. Module type, our panels are actually a bit higher efficiency, but I'll leave them as standard. I'm good with having this thing being really conservative. Generally, any system I've done through here comes out being conservative and produces more. The system itself produces more than the estimate by this website. Totally fine with that. It's a fixed array. System loss, don't really know, don't want to go through all the nitty-gritty details. This is just giving me a ballpark of what I'm looking at. Tilt. This is the angle your panels are tilted at. General rule of thumb for maximum annual production, you want this at your latitude. Up where we are up there, it's about 62 degrees, I believe. Down where we are in Hawaii, it's something like 22, 24, somewhere around there. But for my purposes, all I care about is December 21st. The sun angle in winter is 9 degrees, the zenith is 9 degrees above the horizon. I'll show you how I came up with that later. So right now, in theory, the perfect angle is 85 degrees, but there's only 1 or 2 watt difference in production. It's cheaper and easier to mount it vertically on the wall. 90-degree tilt. Azimuth, you always want the solar system facing 180 degrees, due south. True celestial south if you can do it. Can't always do it. Sometimes you're forced to split them, half the array facing east, half the array facing west, to make up for not being due south, or any combination thereof. Where I am, I wanted it true south. Because this is basically for a rough idea, I don't want or don't care about every little watt nitty-gritty. I'm not going to deal with the advanced parameters. There are lots of other options in here to fine-tune things, figure out exactly what you're going to be able to produce. Don't need to know. We go to the next section. Here is what your annual production will look like. Estimated. Realistically, every time I've done this, the production ends up more. Sometimes considerably more, sometimes a little more. But this showed me what I needed to know. Here in Hawaii, our average daily consumption is somewhere between 20 and 30 kilowatt hour per day. We do not run air conditioning. Obviously, we don't need heat. But we do have electric hot water heater when it needs to supplement the solar hot water heater, and electric dryer. 2 kids, 1 12, 1 14, 2 adults. We go through a lot of laundry. In Alaska, in some respects, we'll have more electrical load than we do down here, but in other respects, possibly less. So figuring, call it 30 kilowatt hour a day. I want to produce a minimum of 600 kilowatt hour per month. Looking at the output calculations from the website, you can see how January, and down here at the bottom, December, and even November is a bit marginal. January and December are looking problematic. January is showing it may only produce 485 kilowatt hour for that month. This is due to daylight hours, this is due to average weather, cloud cover, snowfall, all that kind of good stuff. Same thing for November, 519 kilowatt hour for the month, and the worst of all is December at 247 kilowatt hour. This is when the shortest day of the month is. This is when normally they get the most snow. It's just an all-around bad time. It's the transition, beginning of winter. You get a lot of cloud cover, you get a lot of snowfall. You already have short daylight hours. That is why I wanted to design the system to produce as much as I can for that month. Obviously, if we're looking at 600 kilowatt hour a month average, I need to run a generator. That's not a big issue. What I really want to do is minimize how much I have to run a generator. A couple things we can do during December. Do everything in our power to conserve power, conserve electricity. If you don't use it, you don't have to make it. We can make sure all the lights are turned off, use LED lighting, minimize laundry loads, stretch them out as far as we can if we need to. The other thing I can do is build more power. I already have the panels to produce more. So let's see what we come up with if I add some panels. So, going back to the system information page, we can now add the panels that we already have to see what they're going to gain us. I have roughly another 6.5 kW worth of panels to install. I'll put them above the current panels, so they'll actually kind of form a small parapet wall, or a makeshift fence, if you will, along the high edge of the roof. That brings the total up to 26.2 6 kW. That's the only change we need to make. So we click back to the results, and now you can see that we've added 70, almost 80 watt hour to December. Again, that doesn't bring us up enough to be free and clear. But you can see how November and January look good to go. We're over 600 kilowatt hour for the month average. Probably produce more, maybe less, but either way, it means there'll be little to no generator runtime. That's the whole goal. Having it down to 316 kilowatt hour production, or rather up to 316 kilowatt hour production by using that fourth row of panels that I have already in the warehouse ready to install. That gets us down to where at the most I might have a week to 2 weeks worth of actual run hours on the generator, which isn't bad considering we're pure off grid. One benefit that we have with Vowellhala is that the place is huge. I don't have limitations about what I can do with it. I have ample amount of space and room to build anything I want, which works out well since I really don't want to fill my shop up with a bunch of greasy old equipment that I already own, and I don't want to keep that equipment in the weather. I don't want it buried in snow. I don't want it rained on. I don't want it covered in leaves and just sitting left to rot. So what I can do is build a pole barn. Later on I'll show you how to figure out where to put it later in this video, but I can build a pole barn to the north of our building, roughly the same dimensions. I probably won't go as deep. It won't be 60 by 120. I'll probably go 40 by 120. That way I basically have a whole bunch of stalls for all my iron horses, if you will. This will allow me to place it correctly, aim it the right direction, and get it as high as I need so that it is farther away from the tree line, which will be discussed later in this video, and I can get it far enough and high enough away so that even at the winter solstice, the sun coming over the top of the building will still hit them. By doing that, I can essentially add upwards of, I believe, another 19.5 or more, 20 kilowatt hour. The hybrid inverter I plan on using is capable of 3 6.5 watt arrays feeding it. So that's 19.5 kilowatt hour going into it. I can produce more than that. I can have more power in the arrays, but it will only accept 19.5. Going back to the system information site just for fun, if I take the 26.6 and add the 19.5 of someday I'm hoping drain panels to it, we are now up to 46.1 kW. If we go back to the results, you can see we're still not at the magic 500 kilowatt hour production for December. This is if I try to integrate a Sol-Ark 15K hybrid inverter to where I only use one that can accept 3 inputs and put 3 more arrays on the pole barn. I'm losing my train of thought. There's another way to do it. I can use 2 more of the Sol-Ark 12K hybrids that I already have, which actually will integrate better. Basically, I add 2 more slaves to the system, which will then allow me to effectively double my input and bring it up to, I think it works out to be 53.2. We'll call it that. Whoops. Because what I can do is then put 4 more arrays on. If I do that, and while we're dreaming, it's easy to spend money, not writing a check. This is how I figured out the plan. This is how I figured out what I wanted to do. Now we're at just a tick under 600 kilowatt hour for December. That would be great. But as you can see, That takes a 53.2 kilowatt system to be potentially self-sufficient at the winter solstice, December 21st, at 62 degrees latitude, Wasilla, Alaska, for 30 kilowatt hour consumption, which is an average house is, give or take, or what I'm used to, running shop tools, TVs, chargers, kids not turning lights off, you name it, every little blinky LED in the house, your new dryers, your new refrigerators that all have computer boards in them. It's all parasitic loss. Obviously, we can control that. There is a trick that I'm going to do to drastically drop electrical consumption during the winter. I'm going to build essentially a wood-fired electric dryer. That'll be another project. I don't know when. I do have the majority of what I need to do it up there, other than the time. I'll give you some hints about it later on as well. There are some actual very distinct benefits to building a system this big because I have the shop the size it is. I want to run big tools. I already have multiple welders. I want some more machinery. I'm going to end up trying to get myself a lathe and mill, and by adding at least one more Sol-Ark 12K, I can actually produce true balanced three-phase power in that building. If I get 4, I can still produce true three-phase power and have a little bit more output on it, or a little bit more capability. Or I can leave them all as single phase and essentially end up with over 200 amp of usable power. To do this, I end up with at least 8 batteries on my bank. I'll probably end up closer to 12 as it is anyway. But I will have an off-grid shop capable of running more power than a conventional home, even with a 200 amp service feeding it, because technically I'll have closer to 240, maybe 250 amp service capable on an inrush or for short bursts, and at least 200 amp, 180 amp continuous. Obviously, the more amperage you're using, the more faster it's going to drain the batteries, the more power you have to produce. But with 53 kW worth of solar panels hanging on 2 different walls, that's not a big issue. I'll do the majority of my fabrication and tinkering and puttering and designing and work during 10 months, which, oh shucks, there's no sun. It's a good reason to take a break and go play on a snowmobile. But that's the plan. That's why we're going so big. This is a fully scalable system. Sol-Ark 12K hybrid inverters are awesome. They produce a bunch of power. They also make a smaller version, the 8K. It is great too. The only reason we're going so big is that I want to do a lot of fabrication and not have to run a generator when I'm running tools. Having said all that, it's pretty easy to run away on a tangent. I apologize. Anyway, next question is, how did I come up with the sun angles? That was actually really easy. I stumbled across a website. Where is it here? The website, I lost it. There it is. Timeanddate.com. This is another one. Up here on the right, you can search for city and place. I put in Wasilla, Alaska. More specifically, I put in the street address nearest our property. Our property doesn't actually have a street address. And then once I get there, you can go to the map view, work your way in, drop a pin exactly where your place is. But using this, it gives you real time, the time, date, where you're looking, the direction, the heading of the sun, gives you the sun's altitude. You can see that it's already starting to head down. We're 4.7 degrees and dropping. It shows you the solar window, and then these lines represent daylight savings time. We scroll down here. This is the month of November. This is all your sunrise, sunset. Oh, you have total day length, astronomical twilight, nautical twilight, civil twilight, and then this one is very important, solar noon. we will move this to December. I was working with this earlier, so it's not accurate on dates already. But here we are showing today, December 3rd. Solar noon, 12:48 p.m. Everybody thinks the sun is high at its zenith at 12. Yes and no. On a celestial clock, it would be noon. In real daylight, you have deviation, declination, magnetic north declination, all kinds of other stuff. Anyway, true 180 degrees is 12:48 p.m. So at 12:48 p.m., I want my panels aimed dead south, 180 degrees. Sadly, they are not. Turns out I am about 3.6 degrees off to the east, and it bugs me. There's not a lot I can do about it other than say, hey, I was a rookie making it up as I went. I've never built a warehouse in the forest before, and I'm actually fairly proud that we got as close as we did. There's another very important number here. Besides the heading of 180 degrees at noon, the altitude of the sun right now today was 6 degrees. It's actually 6 point something, but basically it is 6 degrees. That is still not the solstice. We are not at the shortest day of the year yet. Besides the altitude and the zenith, this also shows you how small the solar window is. The arc and shading above the line, this line represents the horizon. This is the amount of sun you get right now. This is the amount of sun below the line that you don't get right now. When the sun first rises above the horizon, it is right now today at 140 degree heading to the southeast, and it sets at 220 degrees to the southwest. When we cut that pie-shaped 2.5 acre lawn, I cut it to 160 degrees and 200 degrees. The reason being, I wanted to give the sun a little bit of time to get up a little higher on the solstice. We scroll down here to the 21st. Now you can see the altitude maxes out at the zenith at celestial noon, highest in the sky at 5 degrees. If we look at where 160 degrees is, the altitude is 3 degrees. This lets it come up a little bit. The sun will not be over the trees very high, or at all possibly, but they will be close to the tops. We will be able to get some light to hit the panels at 11:30 a.m. and it should line up with the eastern side of that pie-shaped cut that I made. The same goes for, where I lost it, 200 degrees. Right there. Same altitude, 3 degrees at 220. So that's showing you I have a 3 degree window of potential solar collection on the winter solstice. It's also showing you that the daylight hours are 5 hours 19 minutes, and only 3 hours are roughly able to actually produce any real amount of power. The nice thing is that you'd think that, oh, it hits 5 degrees at noon, at celestial noon, 12:56. It doesn't. It actually hits it a little bit before and then stays roughly 5 degrees from 12:14 to, so for about an hour, a quarter, hour and a half, it'll be at the highest, which works out really well because the higher it is, the longer it is, the more power we can make, and I'm going to need that power. Alrighty, that's enough number crunching for now. It covers the basics of the design, how we got the angles, how we got the mounting angles for the panels, and the general size of the system. I'm going to end this video here in the sake of saving people's sanity and call it part 1. I hope you've enjoyed this video so far. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section, or if you want more detailed, longer questions or comments, feel free to send me an email from the About page. Until the next time, I'm Ryan, you've been watching Vowell Adventures, and thank you for your time.